All right.
Okay, we'll put the form up at the end.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. Uh, this video is being live streamed. That's really great, Zoom. Now I would like to be able to. There we go. All right. All right, so welcome to our behavioral interview workshop. So I actually got the inspiration for doing this workshop from when we conducted our e-board interviews. And honestly, a lot of the responses we got for our e-board internship position, they were just like total trash, okay? Like these people weren't specific, they didn't have like really clear and concise responses. Uh, this is the part where I was gonna like make a joke and call out one of our interns specifically. They're gonna be in like the audience, and I'd be like, haha, JK. But none of our interns showed up, so I don't know. I don't. Wait, you're an intern? Who are you? Outreach. Stephanie? Okay. Man, Stephanie, her response is really trash, It just, really awful. Like she didn't cite her like experience correctly. This is all like completely false. Stephanie is actually one of our like best candidates. And overall this year, we were really fortunate to have a very strong pool of candidates. But in spite of like a lot of our uh, intern interviewees gave really strong responses to the questions, and they had like good experience and stuff, but they weren't, the responses they gave weren't as strong as they could be. And it wasn't as much a question of what they said as much as what they didn't say. So I was thinking about it a bit myself, right? Like, why am I able to interview, right? Why am I able to give clear and concise responses, right? And the reality is like I have a lot of prior experience, and I've been really fortunate to be able to have a lot of prior experience and put myself in situations where I have to present things, where I have to take a concept and present it in a manner that a lot of people can understand. Really, back in high school, I got started with first robotics, where I had to present both in front of judges that could be technical, non-technical, explain our code to like everyone from a 6-year-old kid to a 60-year-old industry veteran. And over the years, like through college, I was able to present at 2 different conferences, and also like do different presentations in my internships and so on. But the real question here, this is a behavioral interview workshop, right? So what is a behavioral interview? And the answer is it is a soft skills kind of interview, right? So you're focusing on your soft skills. How can you interact with people? How can you, how do you work with others? How do you manage your time? How do you learn new things, right? So there's no leak code questions. Instead, the questions tend to be more open-ended, kind of, you can almost say essay format, right? The goal of a behavioral interview, the reason it's called that, is you want to analyze a candidate's behavior based on their past experiences. And the kind of idea here is that past performance is a prediction of future, right? If somebody behaved in a certain way in a situation in the past, they're likely to do the same thing again, right? And the kind of key questions that an employer is thinking about, right, when they're assessing you as a candidate is, are you able to get things done in a team, right? Can you work well with other people? Are you a culture fit for that company, right? And different companies are going to have different cultures, right? If you're interviewing at a 5-person startup, right, that's going to have a different culture than an established Fortune 500 company with thousands of employees, right? Adaptability, how do you deal with unexpected situations, right? Most people can do what they need to when stuff is clearly laid out for them, right? But how do you deal with change? Do you demonstrate interest in working here, right? How do you show that? And finally, like, do you take ownership and responsibility over your actions? Or are you like, oh yeah, no, that didn't go well. I just threw that person under a bus, right? You don't want to work with that kind of person, right? But the big one here is that collaboration point, right? Can you get things done on time while working inside of a team setting? I would say that's like the primary number one thing that employers are going to be looking for. All right. And to, assess those points, obviously they're going to ask you questions. It's an interview, right? And those can range from really specific, like in this job that you had listed on your resume, you said this, can you explain more about that, right? To all the way to a more general question, like tell me about yourself, right? Really clear, really helpful. And the interviewer, your audience could be anyone from a manager, they could be a technical manager or a non-technical manager with zero engineering background. They could be a fellow engineer. I mean, I'm assuming most of the people here are like CS engineering type candidates, right? Or they could be a recruiter, right? And the differences here are like, even the non-technical manager, right? They're likely the person you're going to be working for if you get the job or internship, right? So they'll be on the team that you'll be joining, right? Whereas a recruiter might not be in that team at all, right? So they could be they're just recruiting for the company as a whole. And depending on who your audience is, you might want to, modify your responses in a way that you can effectively answer the questions that you get. So the goal for today is that no matter who your questions, no matter who your audience is and no matter what questions they ask, you should be able to effectively answer all of the questions. All right. So how do you prepare for a behavioral interview? And kind of the key steps here would be first, you want to do research, right? This is where your preparation starts, right? No matter what, you should go into an interview knowing something about the company that you're interviewing for, the role that you're looking to get, as well as the people that are involved. Then you can draft questions and practice, and then day of the interview is just like what kind of prep you want to do the day of. All right, researching the company. This is probably like the highest level, right? So you can look at like the company's About Us section on their web pages, right? A lot of companies have those like mottos and things that they value, right? Corporate values and so on, right? You can look at their Wikipedia article, blog posts that they may have made, especially if they have like technical blog posts, right? You can find products that are important to a company as well as questions, right? So for products that are important to a company, really that, you're looking for kind of, especially with for-profit companies, that's going to be what products are making a company money, right? And really you want to figure out like, okay, this company, right? What is their business model, right? What are they making? And for prior questions, a lot of times, especially for the larger companies, you can find questions that they asked before online. So the first example here, I have a small indie tech company that some of you might recognize, Google. But right at the top of this is their About Google page. They have their company motto, which is, our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, right? That tells you like, okay, what exactly is this company doing? Next, I picked out an example that's close to Cal Poly Pomona, CoStar. And on their corporate about page, they list that they are a industry leader in commercial real estate. They have an extensive research operation, right? And they have the most comprehensive data available out of any commercial real estate data platform. So, that's just like one of their paragraphs. And I kind of highlighted out those key terms here, like, okay, what is this company doing? What do they value the most themselves? And then from their Wikipedia page, we can also get some like insights about the company, right? We see they are a publicly traded company. They were established 37 years ago. So, fairly long ago, at least in terms of like tech companies, right? And they have over 5,000 employees, right? So, based on how large or how small or what the kind of, no matter what, you want to demonstrate you're a good culture fit for the company, right? So if you go into a startup and you're like, oh, I plan to be really methodical and careful with everything that I do, right? And like research it all the way, right? That might not be the best response, right? Because the startup, they might want to move in a more agile manner, move fast and break things, right? Whereas if you go to an established company, maybe a CoStar or something, right? And you say, yeah, I'm gonna work, make sure I'm doing things correctly, following the right processes, right? They would likely look a lot better on that kind of response. And then finally, this one is from Amazon. So they have their famous leadership principles. I think there's like 15 or so of them. I don't know in total. And I know Amazon does ask I don't know about like for entry level candidates, right? But I know for more experienced candidates, they do ask these in their behavioral interview questions, right? So that's another point you can get from research, right? Is you could just find out like, oh, I'm probably going to be asked about one of these, so I should at least read over them and understand them. And that's something you could find out if you like just Googled Amazon behavioral interview questions. All right. My other two I've listed here are researching a role and researching people. The role part is pretty brief. Your real sources of information are like the job description. You can look at the team and the product, right? If you know you're joining, or if you know the interview is for like a specific team within the company, you can kind of look and read up on the technologies that that team is using based on the job description and so on. You can read up on information, if they have like product blogs or announcements based on that product, right? And researching people, I have stalking listed as one of my bullet points here, but I've done this before. Just like if you get an email, usually you get an email with the name of at least one of the people that is interviewing you, right? And you can like look them up on LinkedIn and just look over their profile. Obviously don't stalk them like actually, right? I don't think it will not help your chances, right? But yeah, you can just look over the LinkedIn, and the things you really want to look for are like their job titles, right? And that can even clue you into the type of interview that you might be expecting, right? If you've been scheduled for an interview with an engineer, you're probably looking at more of a technical interview, right? And maybe even up to like a lead code style, very hard skills interview, right? Whereas if you're scheduled an interview with a non-technical person or someone from HR or the recruiting departments, it's likely to be more of this type of behavioral, non-technical interview. And you can also look for past experience and stuff in common. Potentially name drop this in conversation. I don't know, like, oh, I noticed you also went to Cal Poly Pomona, right? Or something, right? But yeah, and that can be helpful if you can know like if there are certain topics you want to bring up. Okay. Now answering behavioral interview questions. So this is like let's get in like the core of this presentation, right? Which is how do you answer a behavioral interview question? And really what you want to be is specific, concise, and clear. And I have specific bolded out here, right? You want to use precise language. You want to use those action verbs. You want to, first, like just when you hear the question, figure out kind of from that question, what is the interviewer trying to learn about you, right? Like if they ask you, what is a challenge you faced at a past job, right? The story itself, like the actual challenge isn't as important as your reaction to the challenge, right? It's your behavior. So really what they want to try and find out with that kind of question is your adaptability to a different. You want to focus on hard facts. Talk about things that you did. Be specific again, right? Be clear about what you did, why you did it, how you did it. And overall, just be positive too. I think this is like, a lot of the behavioral interview, especially when they're assessing your culture fit, right? They're just, they're looking for like the general vibes, right? So if you're going, you're like mopey or sad, right? That's not going to reflect as well on you as if you're confident and you're just, talking with a smile and so on. Yeah. And I think especially like on the stuff about like precise language, I think a lot of like entry-level candidates, they might just say a vague statement, for example, like, oh, I made things better, right? But I will say like a lot of these statements in my mind, they beget a question, right? Because when you say, oh, I made this app better, the question in my mind is better how, right? If I made this more efficient, I would be asking efficient how, right? So then the precise language would be like in the example of a website, let's say, right? I made it more accessible. I decreased the page load times. I added mobile layouts or so on. All right, so let's go through a quick example question here. So the question here is, what is your greatest strength? And I put the weak response here as my greatest strength is that I'm a quick learner. Done, right? That doesn't really tell me anything about, anyone can say they're a quick learner, right? Anyone could say they're really adaptable or responsible or communicative or decision driven. I don't know, right? Data driven. Yeah, there you go, right? Like, it just reads like one of those like fluff buzzword pieces that you see on like different whatever, right? But yeah, so for the strong response, I'm gonna like paraphrase this as I read it, kind of read it as I would if I were actually talking, right? So I think my greatest strength is my ability to learn things quickly. For example, for a few weeks ago, I attended a hackathon at my school where we had to like make an entire website in just 24 hours. So my team decided to use React.js, but I didn't have any prior experience in React.js. So I had to learn how to use React, right, in a very short period of time. So I first started by just reading the React documentation, and I took notes on things that confused me. Then I asked questions that I had to my teammate, who was like way more experienced in React than I was. And based on like these responses to the questions, I was able to reinforce my knowledge and clear up any misunderstandings that I had. After that, I was able to get started working with React really hands-on. I was able to make, not the greatest progress, right, but still able to get pretty far and develop the login page for our app. Our team went on to win the 4th place prize at the competition, and this was against like 26 other teams. And despite coming in with no React knowledge, I was able to quickly get myself up to speed and have a contribution to our final project. So I was really proud that I was able to use my skill of learning quickly and effectively to make sure that I had a contribution. All right, so like, kind of the things that make this latter response better is that, it's a lot more, robust and concrete in terms of quantifying why, this person is a fast learner, right? And this is not me. I've never attended a hackathon before. All right, so the strategy here, so just getting in a couple like strategies that you can use to answer questions. The big one is STAR. This stands for situation, task, action, result. So in that situation step, you're kind of just setting the stage, right? And don't go on too long, right? For the task, you're going to be talking about what needed to get done, right? Like, okay, what's the big point that needed to happen? The action step would be focusing on what did you do, right? And you really want to focus on what you did. You can use I statements here, right? To say, I did this, I did that. And finally, for the result, you want to talk about really what you accomplished by doing the former 3, or really by doing the actions in the 3rd step, and what the big picture impact looks like. All right, so here's a flow chart. Here they also list like a prepare step beforehand, right? So that would be like as the interviewer is saying the question, you want to kind of listen, figure out what your response looks like. And then, think about an event in the past that reflects, that you can use to answer the question, right? And then finally, in about, a couple of seconds, here it says 5 to 8, that might be a little long, right? But I would say in around like a couple of seconds, you want to kind of figure out what you're going to say, right? Then the next update list is like a 1-sentence summary, right? So that could be, sorry, actually, I'll just stay here. So that's just like, like a quick, like high level, all right, here's what I did. Or so for example, for what is your greatest strength, right? I think my greatest strength is my ability to learn things quickly, right? Then they say, provide context and background. So our customers explained is like their example here. Describe the task, the action, and the result, right? And really, I like what they did in the action section, right, where they started out with the verbs, right? So like, we solved, I calculated, right? I was able to do this, and so on. All right, so here's that strong response from before, and the clear-eyed among you that got more than the 2 hours of sleep that I did would note that it does in fact follow the STAR format. So for the at the beginning here, I kind of set up the situation, right? With a few weeks ago, I attended a hackathon at my school, right? Just like, okay, here's what I needed to do. Situation was this 24 hours needed to build the app, right? That's the task. The task is also kind of like learning React.js. I didn't spell it out in the paragraph, at least. I probably could have. Then you see like the action section takes up the largest portion over here, right? It's like this entire middle, right? And in the action section, it's detailing those clear, specific steps that you took to accomplish that task. And again, right, clear and specific, right? So, how did you learn quickly, right? I read the React documentation, I took notes, I asked questions with my teammate, right? So already just in that like one sentence, you're demonstrating multiple different skills, right? You reading the documentation, right? So, I mean, that's a good place to start. If the person interviewing you was technical, right, they would know like, oh, okay, this person kind of knows what they're doing, right? Making care to take notes about things that confuse me, right? That shows your organization skills, right? And then finally, asking questions to your teammate, that shows, who is more experienced than you, that shows that you can work well in a team with others, right? Especially coming on as an entry-level candidate, right? You're driven to learn and that you're not afraid to ask other people's, especially more experienced engineers, for help. And finally, down here in the results section, we have it quantified by that 4th place prize. Even if you didn't win the prize, you could still like talk about this, right? You just be like, we developed the app, right? That would be your result. And and the result would also be the specific thing that you accomplished, which is the login page for the app. All right. And I have impact here in this like big slide. And this is because like I do want to emphasize like impact here is really, really important, right? And when you're talking about the impact to, especially because impact is usually going to be the last sentence in your response, right? You really want to talk about, you want to make sure, I keep saying be specific. I did not realize I had it like this repeated in my slides, right? But yeah, you want to use metrics when possible. This could be anything from like the performance of whatever program you made, right? If it's something more technical that you're talking about, increasing like server uptime, or you increase the attendance for your club socials, right? And then also when you're discussing your impact, I would say you want to talk about the why, but I'll talk more about this later. All right, the next strategy I'd like to bring up is XYZ. And this is mainly for resume writing, not for interviews, but you can apply a lot of the same principles that I was talking about to interviews. And it was popularized by, I think it was like a Google vice president that came up with this, but the XYZ format is basically that you accomplished X as measured by Y by doing Z. So for the example here on the slide, they have listed for like a technical or engineering, this would be like for a resume statement, right? On your resume, you could put increase server query response time by 15% by restructuring the API. Or for a business candidate, more soft skills, you could say, or yeah, actually just business candidate in general. They have 3 examples here, kind of going from worst to best, right? The first was just like grew revenue for small, medium business candidates, and their last is grew revenue from 15 small and medium business candidates by 10% quarter over quarter by mapping new software features as solutions to their business goals, right? And that is again following the XYZ format because they had what they accomplished, very specific metrics on like what they did, right? As measured by Y, they have that like 10% quarter over quarter growth. And then finally, by doing the Z, right, they are very specific about like what exactly the specific steps that they took to accomplish that goal, right? New software features, past solutions, business goals. Yeah, something. All right. And same thing with the software example, right? Restructuring API. Okay, so yeah, the XYZ format tends to be more for resume, right? But I think you can still use it effectively. Obviously, for an interview, you want more than like a 1-line resume bullet point, right? But a lot of it kind of touches on the same stuff that the STAR method does. All right. Now, what if, they ask you a question, but you've never done what they're asking you about, right? Especially for like a technical skills question, right? Maybe, they ask you about, do you have experience with some technology, but I've never had experience with that technology. And the strategy here, I call it spin positive. It's developed by me. So honestly, you should this is more legit than the one made by the Google VP. Just throw the other one out, right? But you should I say what you should do is take ownership over whatever that negative is or whatever that thing you're lacking is, but then end on a more positive note. So my example, like my personal example, is when I interviewed for VMware, they asked me if I had past experience with Kubernetes, and I did not. So rather than just say, oh, no, I don't have any past experience, what I instead said was, I don't have any past experience with Kubernetes, but I'm really interested in learning about Kubernetes because I know that right now it's a massively important platform for helping companies, move their infrastructure into the cloud, deploy in a cloud-native fashion, right? So yeah, I'd say the big thing here is don't lie, right? Don't just say, oh yeah, I'm a Kubernetes expert, basically invented that thing, and don't spend too long on this because it is still it's an answer you don't have, right? So I wouldn't spend a massive amount of time. And the last bullet point, which I forgot to put up here, is also you can probably only do this once or twice in an interview, right? Because if you do it too many times, well, I mean, you'd still just be giving a bunch of negative responses, right? All right. And my second example for this is everyone's favorite question: what is your greatest weakness, right? And a lot of people for this question, they have that the really stereotypical response, which is, my greatest weakness is I'm too much of a perfectionist. I'm just so hardworking, right? I live and breathe work. I'm on that, is Sigma, only work, nothing else, 32 hours a day grind set, right? Or something similar to that, right? I'm a workaholic, whatever, right? But that doesn't really answer the question at all, right? Because it's about what your greatest weakness is, not some strength that you view as a weakness, right? Or that could be spun as one. And that doesn't tell you anything. That doesn't tell the interviewer anything about yourself, really, right? Especially not with respect to the questions that they're looking to answer about you. So what I would say with this, this is a good place to apply that's been positive strategy, right? So if I had to answer this question, right, if I ever got it in an interview, I would probably say something along the lines of, my greatest weakness is that sometimes I forget about things, right? But what I do to counter this is I, make sure to always take really detailed reminders and create events in my calendar to keep myself on track and make sure that I don't forget about anything important. So basically, when you're answering this type of question, right, where you have to talk about a negative about yourself, and that could be either a negative as in you don't have the technology or tool or skill that they're looking for, right? Or negative as in the question just asks you, tell me about a negative about yourself, right? You can, use this to talk about a negative, right? But then also end on a positive note, right? And in a way that describes the interviewer, hey, this is what I'm doing to improve myself, right? Because nobody's perfect. All right. So the takeaways from the strategies, I like to think there are 3 types of understanding something, right? When it comes to any concept, I would say there's a what, a how, and a why. So with Kubernetes as an example, the what would be, what is Kubernetes? It's a way to deploy containers at scale. How? Complicated. Why is, why would companies want to use this as a technology, right? And the same thing goes for your soft skills answers to behavioral interview questions, right? What did you do? How did you accomplish it? And why, right? Both why in terms of why did you do the things you did, make the decisions you did, right? And also why as an impact, right? Why is what you just talked about important? Why is, why should I care about what you just talked about? And to be successful, you do have to communicate all three, I think. And especially for that why point, you can really hone in the impact and big picture. Okay. So before I get into the into like our activity, I think we have time for it. So I guess like for the why section for this presentation, I would say that a lot of the stuff that I've discussed, right, be it the STAR method, the XYZ, spin positive, right, a lot of that you can use not just in a behavioral interview kind of context, but in any type of presentation, right? Because this is something that I see like lacking in a lot of presentations that students do, be them in their classes or for a job or elsewhere, is they don't have the big picture impact, right? And that's something, really easy that you can add. It can be like 1 or 2 slides, and you can really like hammer in the points that you made and just make your presentation overall much more conclusive. All right. So for the activity section, basically, I'm gonna have you guys like pair up. So just find someone next to you that you want to work with. E-board, feel free to mingle in. But basically just take the time to answer 1 or 2 of these questions. Try to use some of the techniques discussed, and then we'll come back in let's say about 5 minutes. Yeah, that should be enough time. And yeah, that's it. And then if you're in the Zoom, you can just type your response to 1 or more of these questions in the chat. All right. So just pair up and interview each other. That would be my
There's one time I took leadership when wait, hello,
No.
Oh, that's sad.
Do you need something for like NGCP or?
No, I'm just I want to say hi. I just want to say hi. That's all. Someone is supposed to meet with me today for a project, but he dipped out at the last minute. I hate those kind of people. So now I'm here instead. I got stuff to go at 1, but at least I'm here.
Yeah, so we're doing behavioral interview workshop. So
it's behavioral interview workshop.
Basically, yeah, just having everyone like pair up right now, and then ask one of these questions to their partner.
Are you guys ever trying to do like a typical interview workshop?
We've done leak code style stuff in the past.
Yeah, but like you're doing a leak code presentation. You're not doing like someone's grilling you on your like resume or your technical stuff on your resume.
Resume workshops too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, projects I'll be able to go on. I'll be able to do all at the same time. That's just the type of person I am. So most important thing for me at job was picking with our coworkers. I would apply to be in an environment where we could attack. Tell me about a time you got something that's please share any one time we had this I heard named Justin who gave you good. So I talked about it in public and then we had to fix the problem.
I need Boo to go for example of exactly what not to say.
I think I gotta go. I don't have much time allotted here. I thought Taylor would be here. Did I come to say hi? All right. I guess I get to say hi to you though.
Yeah, it was.
Are you going to scale?
Yeah, we need to we're gonna do a carpool, so.
Oh, nice. So I was gonna ask like, is anybody going to scale? So
yeah,
everybody's going to scale. So if they are, then like CSS has something like that, and I'll kind of like try.
Thanks for coming. No, you remind me. Kayla had like a list of reads she wanted me to do, like advertisements.
Career fair is tomorrow. Last day probably has scale in there as well because that thing is like 2 weeks from now?
Yeah, just 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, let's 2 weeks from now.
This one is sure.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a SoCal Linux Expo, but have you used Linux or no?
Yeah, I'm using it right now on my desktop.
Okay, good. What distro? What distro?
I'm using SUSE Tumbleweed.
Oh, so I only know I only have ever dealt with like Debian based stuff. So I'm just using like just like base Debian with some extra stuff on it. That's all. I'm very close to just deleting Windows off my thing. I'm very close. I'm almost there. Almost there.
I play League, and they're gonna add
Oh,
Vanguard to that.
yeah, Vanguard.
So that's never
Good thing I never touch any Riot games. I only play either Steam games or Minecraft, which means that I'm safe. I am safe. We thank Valve for porting Steam to Linux. All right, I gotta go now. See ya.
Oh, I completed it because yeah. I like
Yeah, we did, but my task was mainly focused on it, so it's like why you are doing it. It's great. And then I was like, oh, sorry, I'll have like an emergency. And they never go back to me. I was like, because yes, that is like 5% people in that space. That's more experience in that area. Yeah, and I'm sure like.
I mean, that's just funny because you don't have anything else.
I'm David.
Nice to meet you. The most important thing for you, we're like trying to figure out what it's like day. We were like.
All right, so it's been about 5 minutes, so I'll bring everyone back in. So does anyone have a response to one of the questions that they'd like to volunteer? All right, Chris, you've been voluntold. No, seriously, like any volunteers at all? Anyone?
I can just go, I guess.
All right, sure.
It's kind of funny. Okay, so one time I had to take one time I took leadership was last year when I was living on campus. I would do a lot of grocery shopping with my roommates, and that would lead to a lot of receipts with split expenses. And everyone was like, "Oh, how should we calculate this?" And so I just ended up stepping up and being like, "Oh, I'll just calculate it for you guys." And I kind of stepped up and became the unofficial treasurer for my little friend group. And I was able that kind of developed my technical skills with spreadsheets and also my organizational skills. I was able to use that as a talking point to interview for being the treasurer for the computer science club in my school.
Cool. Well, thank you for the response. All right. So I'd say like in terms of making the response a little bit stronger, I think you could, well, one, you say like kinda a lot, you could just drop that, right? Since you did do those things, right? But overall, I'd say like it's pretty good, right? So you did focus on like a specific situation. You could probably make it like a single event or something even more concrete, right? You could also use, I don't know, metrics. I don't know what metrics you track. I've divvied up 18 purchases between my friends or something, but yeah, overall, it's a really good response. I'm gonna ask Fu for one of his responses, just because we can look at what not to do in a behavioral interview, because I know.
For which one?
Any of them, pick one.
So this time I had multiple projects at a time because I took 4 summer classes because I don't know. I took 4 summer classes at the same time. So the way I juggled the 4 multiple projects was that I based it off like time constraints. So whichever one was coming up first, whichever one was doable first, I focused on that and then did my part in the other ones. I would ask other team members if they needed any help, if they weren't working their part properly. And, offer any assistance, anything, they need, like, any error checking, I would help them with.
I needed a non-serious response. I didn't expect you to respond seriously.
In summary, I just stayed awake all the time in my classes.
All right.
I didn't juggle, I just did all of them at the same time. I'm just that guy.
Exactly. So the problem with like that kind of response is, it isn't like, it doesn't tell you, just saying you're that guy, right? Doesn't really tell the interviewer anything about like, oh, how's this person going to be a culture fit? How are they going to handle unexpected situations, right? I would say as to like who's other more serious response, I think you could still like, again, like have more concrete details, hone in on a specific event or a specific thing you did, right? Yeah, and just overall, just make sure you have like a good structure, beginning, middle, end, right? The thing with a behavioral interview is you are telling a story, right? And arguably with just like speech writing and a lot of like different types of presentations, you are just telling a story, right? If you've ever seen like a TED Talk, right? And yeah, so you do want to make sure you have like a clear story. You don't want to be like Star Wars Episode 9 or something, right? Yeah. All right, can I get like one more example and then we can probably tee things up? Anyone?
Right, I had a question before I give up.
Oh, sure.
For a question, like, it's like, I think this depends on like what you're applying for, but like, tell me about yourself. Like, how long would you like yap about yourself for? And then, like, what qualities?
Okay.
Describe it? Because it seems like a really open.
This is one of those things that, like, I would argue some questions are more important than others, right?
Yeah.
Especially depending on like what your responses are. Tell me about yourself. It's a good question because it is really open-ended, right? Like probably one of the most open-ended there are, and you can use that to steer the conversation, right? So if there is like a specific thing you want to focus on, a specific quality about yourself or past experience, right? You could talk about that in your tell me about yourself, right? As far as like an answer to that, yeah, I think that would be like my answer, right? Is like think about, and this is actually, so I think I'm like, I don't have like the slide here, but there should be an end slide that is in that draft questions and practice, right? So some like 2 tips for drafting questions is one, when I was preparing for some interviews in the past, I just like went down my resume, right? So like all my past experiences and just bullet pointed out like 1 or 2 things that I can talk about for each of those points on my resume, right? So like, okay, in this student activity or like this club I was in, I could talk about these 2 things, right? And so on. And then I think that's the same thing with, something like tell me about yourself, right? Potentially you could talk about any of those like different things that you did, right? So if there's something, that is actually a question, is like, what are you most proudest of, or what's your greatest accomplishment, right? I think you can use a similar answer for tell me about yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sure.
And then the drafting questions, part of that is also remember the part about the research and stocking part, right? When you research your company, right, you can figure out if there are past questions they've used. When you research the role and the people, right, you can also kind of guess like what kind of questions they might ask, right?
And then if it's like you're interviewing with like a more technical person, or like a response to like tell me about yourself, would you like lean more towards like your technical skills that you like
I think you can. You don't have to, right? Yeah, if like if it's a behavioral interview with a technical person, you can still keep it like you want to keep it behavioral, right? You want to make sure it's on your soft skills, right? And how you've demonstrated those, right? But I think, what was I gonna say? I lost my train of thought, sorry. But no, I think for with the technical person, I would say what it does give you is the leeway to be more technical, right? Since they'll know like if you mention a specific tool or technology, right? You can use, I would say you can use shorthand, right? Like in your situation section, right? You don't have to, like, let's say you're with a completely non-technical person, right? When you mention, let's say React.js in that example, right? You might need to like drop in a little bit about what React.js is, right? Whereas a technical person, they're going to know that, right? They might know the industry lingo, right? That you can use to like just communicate in a shorter fashion, right? And budget your time more effectively. All right. Any other questions? Or any other responses to the questions? Okay. I have this like one resource. I found this like 5 minutes before we started here. But it's 30 behavioral interview questions. It says soft skills. And this one's really great because I think I can open it here. That change the tab. That's excellent. It's like really small. Okay. There we go. Okay, this one is really great because it's kind of made for interviewers, not interviewees, right? So it has not only the question, but also like what someone giving an interview should be looking for in a response, right? Which from you, the person that's taking the interview, right, is just what you should include in your response. So recall a time when you're assigned a task outside of your job description. How did you handle the situation? What was the outcome? And here it says like, okay, you should be listening for understanding this. Their job may evolve, willingness to try something new, necessary stats, right? So if you get this type of question, you know, okay, I want to include these types of things in my response. And they split it up into a couple of different categories as well. They've got, how do you demonstrate accountability, culture, collaboration. I think we've got leadership and also growth potential. Yeah, and prioritization, which is like organization and task management, right? And yeah, you can see like a few of the questions I did take from here. There you go. Oh, all right. Anyways, I think that's it. But like, yeah, just to reiterate on some of those big picture points, right? Being able to present both yourself and your ideas clearly, right, to a wide range of audiences, like this is a very, very important skill to have, right? And something that I think, especially as like CS majors and engineers, a lot of us don't have that ability, right? Maybe we can talk in a very technical fashion, in a very fashion that makes sense to someone that already understands it, right? But that's not very useful, right? Because we got to be able to explain things to people that don't understand a concept as well, right? And being able to, sell yourself in a sense, right? But really just advocate for yourself, right? That is a critical skill. And especially as you move higher and higher up throughout whatever job you do, right? But even at the low levels, right? Like in an internship, right? Being able to have the skill, right, is, it's just very useful to have in your back pocket, right? So yeah. Anyways, I think that's our presentation. Do we have a sign-in code? Do we ever?
Yeah. It should be fine now.
Okay. So we do have that. Hopefully you can actually sign in and not edit the form this time.
Yeah.
But